she told me, "Don't expect special treatment." I agreed, and her shock when the same rule applied to her was priceless. That single sentence changed everything between us, though Michelle didn't realize it at the time. I'm Thomas, 34, manufacturing supervisor at a precision parts facility in Oceanside. I'd spent 3 weeks planning our anniversary dinner at the Pearl Bay, calling twice to confirm the beachfront table with the sunset view Michelle mentioned loving when we drove past it last spring. I wore the Tag Heuer watch she'd given me for my 30th birthday, the one I usually saved for special occasions because I was terrified of scratching it at work. That morning, I'd stopped at the boutique florist downtown and picked up white orchids, her favorite, the expensive Phalaenopsis variety that cost me $90 but made her smile in a way that usually felt worth every penny. The hostess led us to our table right as the sun started painting the ocean orange and gold, exactly the timing I'd requested. Michelle looked beautiful in that navy dress she'd bought for her company's annual gala, her auburn hair pulled back in the elegant style she wore for important meetings. She worked as corporate communications manager for a regional healthcare network, crafting press releases and managing their social media presence with the same attention to detail she applied to everything in her life. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. We ordered wine, split the calamari appetizer, made small talk about her latest charity committee project and my frustration with our new production line software that kept glitching during overnight shifts. But I'd noticed the distance growing between us for months now, the way she always seemed preoccupied or busy with something that didn't involve me. Her pottery classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, wine tasting groups every other weekend, board meetings for the Children's Hospital fundraising committee that somehow required 3 dinners per month. I wasn't tracking her schedule out of jealousy or control, just noticing how little space remained for us in the calendar of her life. When our entrees arrived, Maine lobster for her and blackened mahi-mahi for me, she set down her wine glass with that particular deliberateness that meant she'd been planning what came next. "Thomas, I need to say something that's been on my mind," she started, not quite meeting my eyes. I set down my fork, giving her my full attention like I always did when she used that serious tone. "I think we need to recalibrate our expectations in this marriage. Just because we're spouses doesn't mean you should expect special treatment or preferential status over my other commitments and responsibilities." The words landed like a punch I hadn't seen coming. Special treatment. I'd made a reservation, bought flowers, dressed up, and cleared my entire evening because I thought anniversaries mattered to both of us. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," I said, keeping my voice level even though something cold was settling in my chest. "I mean that marriage is just one part of my life, not my entire identity. I have personal growth to pursue, friendships to maintain, professional development that matters to me. I can't always prioritize couple activities just because you expect me to be available whenever it's convenient for you." I thought about the bowling league invitation my coworker Derek had extended 6 times over the past year, which I declined every time because Tuesday was one of the few nights Michelle and I used to spend together before her pottery obsession started. I thought about the vintage car show last month that I'd skipped because it conflicted with her book club's annual dinner, even though I'd been looking forward to seeing a restored 1967 Mustang that a collector was bringing from Arizona. I thought about the camping trip my college roommates had been planning for Labor Day weekend, which I'd already mentally declined because Michelle usually liked us to host her parents that weekend. "So you're saying I shouldn't expect you to make me a priority?" I said, more statement than question. "I'm saying I shouldn't have to feel guilty for having a full life outside our relationship. Healthy marriages allow both people space for individual pursuits and separate interests." She took a bite of lobster, seemingly satisfied that she'd communicated something important and reasonable. I nodded slowly, watching the sunset reflect off her wine glass. "You're absolutely right," I said, and I meant it. If special treatment wasn't part of our marriage agreement, then it worked both directions. She seemed relieved by my agreement, probably expecting some argument or hurt feelings she'd have to manage. Instead, I picked up my fork and finished my mahi-mahi while something fundamental shifted in how I understood our relationship. We weren't partners building a life together. We were roommates with legal paperwork and shared expenses, each pursuing our own interests while occasionally occupying the same space. If that's what she wanted, I could absolutely deliver exactly that. The drive home was quiet, Michelle scrolling through her phone while I focused on the coastal highway, already mentally reviewing which commitments and accommodations I'd been making that no longer made sense under this new framework. She'd given me explicit permission to stop treating her differently than any other person in my life, to stop arranging my world around her preferences and schedule. I intended to take that permission seriously, methodically, and completely. When we pulled into our driveway, she kissed my cheek and thanked me for a lovely dinner, seemingly oblivious to the fact that she just fundamentally altered the terms of our marriage. I smiled and told her I was glad she enjoyed it, already knowing this would be the last anniversary dinner I'd planned with 3 weeks of advance coordination, special requests, and careful attention to details that apparently didn't constitute special treatment she wanted or valued. The orchids sat on our kitchen counter for 9 days before they started wilting, and I never bought her flowers again. The shift started small, almost imperceptible, but it was deliberate and strategic on my part. Derek had been inviting me to Tuesday night bowling league for over a year, always with the same enthusiastic pitch about how our team needed a decent anchor and the beer was cheap. I'd always declined because Tuesdays used to be when Michelle and I would cook dinner together and watch whatever show we were binge-watching that month, back when she actually wanted to spend evenings at home. That tradition had died when she started her pottery classes, but I'd kept the night open anyway, some pathetic hope that she might cancel one week and we could reclaim what we'd lost. The Tuesday after our anniversary dinner, I texted Derek a simple message: "Count me in for bowling. What time should I be there?" His response came back in seconds, 3 exclamation points and a gif of someone throwing a strike. I didn't mention it to Michelle until she asked what I wanted for dinner that evening. "I'll grab something on the way home from bowling," I said, tying my work boots in the mudroom. I joined Derek's league. "Starts at 7. She looked up from her laptop, confusion crossing her face. "You're going bowling? Tonight?" "Yeah, every Tuesday from now on. Should be fun." I grabbed my keys and wallet, deliberately casual about the whole thing. "Didn't you want to talk about refinancing the mortgage? I thought we were doing that tonight." "We can handle that another time. I've committed to the team now." I headed out before she could respond, and I felt something that had been tight in my chest for months start to loosen. Thursday evening, I came home at my usual time, but instead of asking about her pottery class or what she'd learned, I grabbed a beer and settled into my recliner with the military history book I'd been meaning to read for 6 months. When she got home at 9:30, clay still under her fingernails, she seemed to expect me to ask about her evening. I just nodded hello and kept reading. By the 3rd week, the pattern was established. I stopped clearing my schedule around her availability and started making plans based solely on what I wanted to do. My college roommate Jake called about a camping trip to Joshua Tree National Park the first weekend in October, something he'd been trying to organize for 2 years. Previously, I would have checked with Michelle first, made sure it didn't conflict with anything on her calendar, probably declined if she expressed even mild disappointment about me being gone. This time I just said yes. "I'll be at Joshua Tree October 6th through 8th, I mentioned over breakfast the following Saturday. Jake finally got everyone coordinated for that camping trip. Michelle set down her coffee mug. "That's the weekend of the Oceanside Arts Festival. I was hoping we could go together." "You should definitely go. I heard they're featuring some incredible glass blowers this year." I buttered my toast, not elaborating or apologizing. "Thomas, we usually decide on weekend plans together. You have your pottery exhibitions and wine tastings. I've got camping with friends. We're both pursuing our individual interests, right?" She opened her mouth, closed it, and picked up her phone instead. I could see her mentally recalibrating, trying to figure out why the framework she'd established suddenly felt different when I was the one implementing it. The following Saturday, Michelle had her big pottery exhibition opening at a gallery downtown, her first time displaying her work publicly. She'd mentioned it several times over the past month, clearly expecting I'd attend and play the supportive husband role, admiring her ceramic bowls and making small talk with her art friends. That same Saturday, the West Coast Classic Car Show was happening at the convention center, the one I'd skipped last year. I left the house at 9 in the morning wearing jeans and my comfortable sneakers. "The exhibition opening is at 2 o'clock, Michelle called from the bedroom where she was getting ready. "I know. Have a great time. I'm sure people will love your work. I was already halfway out the door. You're not coming? The surprise in her voice was obvious. I've got plans at the car show. It runs until 6. Thomas, this is important to me. I've been working toward this for months. I paused at the door, turned back to look at her. And I hope it goes incredibly well. But you've been clear that we shouldn't expect special treatment from each other. The car show is important to me. I watched something flicker across her face, confusion mixed with what might have been hurt. That's different. This is a milestone. And the car show only happens once a year. I missed it last time for your book club dinner. I'm not missing it again. I left before she could argue further, and I spent 6 hours walking through rows of pristine vintage vehicles, talking shop with other enthusiasts, and not once checking my phone to see how her exhibition was going. When I got home that evening, she was already there, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and an expression I couldn't quite read. How was the show? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Incredible. Saw a fully restored 1969 Dodge Charger in Hemi Orange, original engine. Guy's been working on it for 12 years. I grabbed a beer from the fridge. How was your opening? Fine. Good turnout. She took a long sip of wine. Several people asked where you were. What did you tell them? That you had a prior commitment. She wasn't looking at me now, staring at her wine instead. Well, that's accurate. I settled into my recliner and pulled up the photos I'd taken at the car show, genuinely pleased with how the day had gone. The next week, I accepted an invitation to a craft beer festival that conflicted with her charity committee's annual gala planning dinner. The week after that, I scheduled a fishing trip with my father the same weekend she'd assumed we'd drive to her sister's house for a birthday party. I stopped asking permission, stopped seeking approval, stopped arranging my life around her calendar. Every time she expressed surprise or disappointment, I calmly reminded her of the framework she'd established. No special treatment. No expectation of preferential status. Individual pursuits taking precedence over couple activities. She'd written the rules. I was just following them with precision and consistency she apparently hadn't anticipated. The bowling league and car shows were surface-level adjustments, visible changes Michelle could observe and question. What she didn't see immediately were the structural modifications I was making to our financial and legal entanglements, the deeper architecture of our supposedly permanent partnership. I'd always been methodical about planning, the kind of person who read estate planning books for fun and understood the difference between revocable and irrevocable trusts. Michelle used to tease me about it, calling me her sexy spreadsheet guy when we first got married, back when my careful nature seemed endearing rather than boring. 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I scheduled an appointment with Richard Vega, the estate attorney who'd helped us draft our wills 5 years earlier. His office overlooked the harbor, all dark wood and leather chairs that smelled expensive. Thomas, good to see you, Richard said, shaking my hand. What brings you in today? I need to revise my will and several other documents. Significant changes to beneficiary designations and asset distribution. I handed him the folder I'd prepared with notes and current documentation. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly as he reviewed my requests. My existing will left everything to Michelle, standard arrangement for married couples. I wanted that changed completely. Primary beneficiaries would now be my younger sister Rachel and my father, with specific bequests for my 2 nephews' college funds. Michelle would receive nothing except what the law required, which in our state wasn't much given how we'd structured certain assets. This is a substantial departure from your current estate plan, Richard said carefully. Has something happened I should know about? My wife made it clear that she doesn't view our marriage as requiring special treatment or preferential consideration. I'm simply aligning my estate planning with that philosophy. Richard was too professional to pry further, but I could see him processing the implications. We spent 2 hours restructuring everything, and when I left his office, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd shed weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. The investment portfolio came next. Michelle and I had merged our accounts years ago, one joint brokerage holding both our retirement contributions and individual stock purchases. I'd been more aggressive with investments, buying into technology companies and cryptocurrency when it was still relatively new, while Michelle preferred safe dividend stocks and bonds. Our advisor had always treated it as one unified portfolio, but there was nothing legally preventing me from separating my contributions. I called Bergstrom Financial on a Tuesday morning during my lunch break. I need to establish a separate brokerage account and transfer specific assets from the joint account, I told our advisor, David Bergstrom. Just the holdings I purchased with my individual earnings and contributions. David was quiet for a moment. Thomas, that's going to require documentation and Michelle's signature on several forms since you're moving assets from a joint account. Only for the jointly purchased assets. The stocks I bought with my bonuses and my cryptocurrency holdings were never joint purchases. I'll need documentation showing the acquisition dates and funding sources for everything. It took 3 weeks and a significant amount of paperwork, but I managed to extract roughly 60% of the portfolio value into my individual account. The cryptocurrency alone had appreciated to almost $80,000, all purchased with my performance bonuses from work. Michelle had actually mocked those purchases when I made them, calling Bitcoin nerd money that would never amount to anything real. The real nuclear option was the rental condo. My parents had left it to me when they died in a car accident 7 years ago, a 2-bedroom unit in a decent neighborhood that generated about $1,800 monthly in rental income. When Michelle and I got married, I'd added her name to the deed, thinking that's what you did when you built a life together. That decision had been emotional, not strategic, and I'd regretted it occasionally over the years when she'd talk about selling it to fund her various hobby pursuits. I contacted a real estate attorney, different from Richard to avoid any conflicts, and asked about removing Michelle as co-owner. Turned out it was complicated but possible, especially since I'd inherited the property individually and added her later. The solution was creating a revocable living trust, transferring the condo into it, and naming myself as sole trustee and beneficiary. Michelle would need to sign a quitclaim deed, but I could present that as routine estate planning optimization, which technically it was. This removes her ownership interest entirely, the real estate attorney warned me. If you're trying to protect the asset in case of divorce, there are other approaches that might be less inflammatory. I'm not planning for divorce. I'm restructuring my assets to reflect current priorities and relationships. The attorney gave me a look that suggested he'd heard that before, but he drafted the documents anyway. Getting Michelle to sign was easier than I'd anticipated. I presented it one evening along with a stack of other estate planning updates Richard had prepared, describing everything as technical optimization for tax purposes and liability protection. She barely read any of it, just signed where I'd marked with sticky arrows while she was watching some reality show about people renovating beach houses. "This is why I married someone detail-oriented," she said, handing back the signed documents. "I'd never keep track of all this stuff. Just want to make sure everything's properly structured," I replied, sliding the quitclaim deed back into its folder. The mortgage company sent verification letters 2 weeks later, routine correspondence about the removed co-borrower status on the investment property. Michelle found them in the mail stack one afternoon when I was still at work. Her text came through while I was reviewing production reports. "Why am I getting letters about being removed from the condo mortgage? What's going on?" I waited until I got home to respond in person. She was standing in the kitchen with the letters spread across the counter, her corporate communications training evident in how she'd organized them chronologically. "You removed me from the condo." It wasn't a question. I restructured the ownership through a trust for estate planning purposes. It's more tax efficient this way. "Thomas, that's my property too. We've been collecting that rental income together for years. It was my inheritance. You were added as a courtesy when we got married, but given our current relationship framework, it makes more sense for me to maintain individual ownership of individual assets." Her face was flushing now, anger replacing confusion. "Our current relationship framework? What the hell does that mean?" "You established that marriage doesn't entitle either of us to special treatment or preferential status. I'm simply ensuring my financial planning reflects that reality. People who are priorities in my life get considered in my long-term planning. People who explicitly don't want to be priorities shouldn't expect financial entanglement or inheritance benefits." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. This is insane. You're dismantling our marriage over one conversation? I'm not dismantling anything. I'm accepting the terms you set and organizing my life accordingly. No special treatment means no automatic access to my assets, my inheritance, or my future estate. It's actually very logical and consistent with your stated philosophy. Michelle opened her mouth, closed it, looked back down at the letters. For the first time since that anniversary dinner, I saw genuine fear cross her face, the dawning realization that the framework she'd established had implications she hadn't fully considered. "We need to talk about this," she finally said. "We are talking about it. And I've explained the reasoning clearly. Unless you'd like to discuss revising the fundamental terms of our relationship, the financial restructuring stands." I walked to the bedroom, leaving her standing in the kitchen with those letters, and I didn't feel guilty. I felt strategic, methodical, and finally in control of a situation that had been making me feel powerless for months. 7 weeks after the anniversary dinner, Michelle's confusion was morphing into something that looked like desperation, though she was trying hard to mask it with irritation and righteous indignation. The woman who declared she needed space and independence was suddenly very concerned about how much space I was taking for myself. It started with small observations, comments that felt like test balloons she was floating to gauge my response. "You've been gone a lot lately," she mentioned one evening when I came home from the bowling league. "I was tired, my shoulders sore from throwing too many hooks, and I just wanted a shower and maybe a sandwich. Tuesday nights, yeah. Same as your pottery classes. I mean in general. You're never home anymore." I grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter. "I'm home most evenings. I'm just not sitting around waiting for you to decide you want company." Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Isn't it? You're at pottery Tuesday and Thursday. Wine tasting every other Saturday. Charity committee meetings twice a month. Book club the first Wednesday. I'm just filling the gaps with my own activities." She didn't have a response to that, probably because we both knew the math was on my side. The following week, I mentioned I was going to a men's poker night that Derek was hosting. 5 of us from work getting together on a Friday evening, nothing fancy, just cards and beer and the kind of aimless conversation that happens when you're not trying to impress anyone. Michelle appeared in the garage doorway as I was heading out, that hovering energy of someone who wants to say something but doesn't know quite how to phrase it. "What time will you be back?" she asked. "Probably midnight, maybe later if the game runs long. Don't wait up. It's just that we haven't had a Friday night together in a while." I paused with my hand on the car door. "You had book club last Friday. The Friday before that, you were at that fundraiser gala. The Friday before that, you went to that wine bar opening with your coworkers. This is the first Friday in a month I've made plans that didn't involve sitting home alone. You could have come to any of those things with me. Could I? You've never actually invited me. You just announce you're going and leave." She crossed her arms, defensive now. "You never seemed interested in my activities. Because you made it clear they were your individual pursuits that I shouldn't expect to be included in. I'm just following your lead." I got in the car before she could respond, and I saw her standing in the garage in my rearview mirror, looking smaller somehow than she had 7 weeks ago. The poker night was exactly what I needed, 5 guys talking about nothing important, laughing at stupid jokes, and not once did anyone mention relationship frameworks or special treatment. When I got home at 1:30 in the morning, Michelle was still awake, scrolling on her phone in bed. She didn't say anything, but I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat. The real breaking point came when she tried to leverage guilt over the golf tournament. I'd signed up for a charity scramble at the nicer course up the coast, something I did every year with my father and 2 of his old Navy buddies. It was the second Saturday in November, locked in my calendar since July. Michelle's book was officially launching that same weekend. Some anthology her book club members had contributed essays to about finding yourself after 30. She'd written a piece about her pottery journey and self-discovery through art. The launch party was scheduled for Saturday evening at a wine bar downtown, the kind of event where everyone would be dressed nicely and making intellectual conversation about creative fulfillment. "You're coming to my book launch, right?" she asked on Thursday evening, 2 days before the event. "I can't. I've got the golf tournament with my dad." Been on the calendar for months. She set down the pasta she'd been stirring, turned to face me fully. Thomas, this is my book launch. My name is literally printed in this book. And I'm really proud of you. I'm sure it'll be a great event. But you're choosing golf over supporting me. I'm honoring a commitment I made months ago. Same way you honor your pottery class commitments and charity meetings. This is different. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I thought about the anniversary dinner, the orchids, the beachfront table. Most things are once in a lifetime if you think about it. That doesn't mean I'm required to drop everything else. Required? I'm your wife, Thomas. You should want to be there. And you're asking me to cancel plans with my father, who's 68 years old and looks forward to this tournament all year, so I can stand in a wine bar listening to people I don't know talk about essays I haven't read. Help me understand why your event automatically takes priority over mine. She stared at me and I watched something crack in her composure. Because I'm asking you to. Because it matters to me. Because that's what people who love each other do. People who love each other also don't tell their spouse that marriage doesn't entitle them to special treatment. You can't have it both ways, Michelle. Either we prioritize each other, or we don't. You chose don't. Saturday came, and I went to the golf tournament. My father noticed I seemed lighter, more relaxed than I'd been in months. Everything okay with you and Michelle? He asked while we waited on the 7th tee. Honestly, Dad, I don't know. We're figuring some things out. Marriage is work, son. But it's supposed to be work you both want to do. I nodded, but I wasn't sure Michelle wanted to do any work that involved compromise or sacrifice. She wanted independence without consequences, freedom without responsibility. When I got home that evening, sunburned and tired from 18 holes in the coastal wind, Michelle was on the couch with a glass of wine and red eyes that suggested she'd been crying. The book launch photos were all over her Instagram, her smiling with her book club friends, toasting with champagne, looking successful and happy. Missing from every single photo was any evidence that she'd wanted me there. How was golf? She asked, her voice flat. Good. Shot an 86, which isn't bad for that course. How was your launch? Fine. People kept asking where you were. What did you tell them? That you had a prior commitment. That you couldn't make it. She took a long drink of wine. They thought it was weird that my husband wasn't there for my book launch. Did you tell them you specifically said I shouldn't expect special treatment in our marriage? She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not what I meant and you know it. Then what did you mean, Michelle? Because I've been trying to understand for 2 months now, and the only interpretation that makes sense is that you wanted complete freedom to do whatever you wanted while I continued organizing my entire life around your schedule and preferences. That's not equality. That's not partnership. That's me being your emotional support accessory who exists to validate your choices without expecting anything in return. I just wanted you to understand that I have my own life, my own interests, my own identity outside of being your wife. And I've given you exactly that. I've stopped expecting you to prioritize me. I've stopped organizing my schedule around yours. I've stopped treating you any differently than I'd treat any other person in my life. You got precisely what you asked for. She was crying now, real tears streaming down her face, not the controlled emotional display she used when she wanted something. This isn't what I wanted. I wanted you to fight for us, to show me that I mattered enough for you to push back when I was being distant. So this was a test? You told me you didn't want special treatment to see if I'd refuse to accept that? No, I don't know. I just felt like you took me for granted, like you assumed I'd always be there no matter what you did or didn't do. I sat down in the recliner, suddenly exhausted by the entire conversation. Michelle, I planned an anniversary dinner 3 weeks in advance. I bought your favorite flowers that cost almost $100. I wore the watch you gave me. I made sure everything was perfect because I wanted you to feel special and appreciated. And you responded by telling me that being married doesn't entitle me to expect special treatment from you. If that's taking you for granted, then I genuinely don't understand what you want from me. The uneasy truce lasted exactly 8 days. Michelle had been circling around something all week, starting conversations she didn't finish, asking questions about my schedule that felt loaded with implications she wouldn't articulate. I could feel the pressure building like a storm system moving up the coast, inevitable and increasingly volatile. Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen making a protein shake before my cycling club ride, measuring out the powder and almond milk with the precision I applied to most things in my life. I had 45 minutes before I needed to leave to meet the group at the marina parking lot. Enough time to drink this, change into my gear, and load my bike onto the car rack. Michelle appeared in the doorway wearing her bathrobe, arms crossed, that particular expression on her face that meant she'd been awake for a while rehearsing what came next. "We need to talk. Right now." I continued blending the shake, the motor loud enough that I could pretend I hadn't heard her clearly. When I turned it off, she was still standing there, waiting. "I've got a ride in 40 minutes. Can this wait until this afternoon?" "No, Thomas, it cannot wait. It's been waiting for weeks while you systematically destroy our marriage and act like you're doing nothing wrong." I poured the shake into my water bottle, took a long drink before responding. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply living according to the framework you established." "Stop saying that. Stop hiding behind my words like they gave you permission to treat me like I'm invisible, like I don't matter to you anymore." Her voice was rising, that controlled corporate tone she used for difficult meetings cracking under genuine emotion. "You matter to me exactly as much as I matter to you, which according to your own statement is less than your pottery classes, wine tastings, charity committees, and book club activities. I'm just matching your energy, Michelle." "Matching my energy? You've cut me out of your life completely. You've removed me from your assets, your plans, your schedule. You've turned into this cold, calculating stranger who measures every interaction like it's a business transaction." I set down the water bottle, leaned back against the counter. "Let me ask you something. When was the last time you asked about my day at work? About the production line issues I've been dealing with, or the promotion opportunity my supervisor mentioned, or literally anything about what matters to me outside of how it affects your schedule?" She opened her mouth, closed it. We both knew she couldn't answer that question. "When was the last time you suggested we do something together that you knew I'd enjoy? The last time you cleared your calendar to spend time with me instead of expecting me to clear mine for you? The last time you treated our marriage like it was something you actually valued?" I've been trying to find myself, to build an identity that isn't just being someone's wife. And I've been trying to be someone's husband, which apparently makes me clingy and demanding and guilty of expecting special treatment I'm not entitled to. My voice was calm, factual, the same tone I used when explaining manufacturing defects to quality control inspectors. "You can't have independence without consequences, Michelle. You can't demand freedom from relationship obligations and then get angry when I stop obligating myself to you. This isn't about independence. This is about you punishing me for saying one thing that hurt your feelings." "One thing? You told me that being your husband doesn't entitle me to be a priority in your life. You established that our marriage is just one part of your existence, not something that deserves special consideration." Those weren't careless words, Michelle. You've been living that philosophy for months before you finally said it out loud at that restaurant. The pottery classes you won't miss even when I'm homesick with the flu. The wine tastings that take priority over our anniversary weekend. The charity meetings that somehow require 3 evenings a month when I know for a fact most organizations meet once. You've been showing me exactly where I rank in your priorities, and it's somewhere below hobbies you picked up 18 months ago. Her face was red now, tears starting to form. "So what, you're just going to withdraw completely? Stop trying? Give up on us?" "I'm not giving up on anything. I'm accepting reality. You want a marriage where both people maintain complete independence, pursue separate interests, and don't expect preferential treatment from each other. That's what I'm giving you. The fact that you're unhappy with it suggests you never actually wanted equality. You wanted the freedom to prioritize yourself while I continued prioritizing you. That's not fair. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean? Explain it to me, because I've been trying to understand for 3 months and the only interpretation that fits your actual behavior is that you wanted permission to be selfish without guilt." She was crying fully now, makeup starting to run. "I wanted you to care enough to fight for us. To push back when I was pulling away. To show me that I was important enough that you wouldn't just let me drift off into my own world." So this was manipulation. Emotional testing. Say something hurtful to see if I'd beg you to take it back. Prove my devotion by refusing to accept your stated boundaries. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Do you understand how toxic that is? How fundamentally disrespectful it is to play games with someone's feelings instead of just communicating what you actually need. I wasn't playing games. I was scared that we'd become roommates, that you were just going through the motions, that I didn't actually matter to you beyond being the person who happened to be there. And your solution was to tell me I shouldn't expect to matter to you, and then get upset when I stopped acting like you did? She didn't answer, just stood there crying, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a tiny crack in my resolve. Not enough to change course, but enough to acknowledge that we were both drowning in a situation neither of us had intended to create. Here's the thing, Michelle. Partnership requires both people showing up. It requires mutual effort, mutual priority, mutual investment. You can't demand that I make you my focus while you treat me as optional. That's not independence. That's wanting all the benefits of marriage with none of the responsibilities. I do want to show up. I do want us to be priorities for each other. Then you need to demonstrate that through consistent action, not just words when you're upset that the consequences of your choices finally caught up with you. Because right now, you're not upset that our marriage is failing. You're upset that I stopped being the only one trying to hold it together. I grabbed my water bottle and headed toward the bedroom to change. I need to leave for my ride in 20 minutes. We can continue this conversation later, but I'm not going to cancel my plans to accommodate your sudden realization that actions have consequences. You taught me that lesson very thoroughly. She followed me down the hall. So you're just going to leave? Walk away in the middle of this? I'm going to honor a commitment I made to people who actually include me in their lives. If you want to talk tonight, I'll be home around 3. If you want to keep crying and making this about how I'm the villain for treating you exactly how you asked to be treated, I'm not interested in that conversation. I changed quickly, loaded my bike, and left. In my rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the driveway watching me go, and I felt something that might have been regret mixed with satisfaction. She'd wanted to know if she mattered enough for me to fight. What she was discovering was that I'd been fighting for months while she was too busy with pottery and wine to notice. The cycling ride was brutal, 48 miles of coastal hills that left my legs screaming and my lungs burning. But it cleared my head in a way that conversation with Michelle never could, the simple mechanics of pedaling and breathing and pushing through physical discomfort that had clear cause and effect. When I got home that afternoon, exhausted and dehydrated, Michelle was sitting at the dining table with papers spread everywhere. Bank statements, investment summaries, insurance policies, mortgage documents. Every piece of financial paperwork we owned, organized into neat piles that suggested she'd been working on this for hours. We need to talk about what you've done to our finances, she said, her voice steady now, back to that corporate communications tone she used when she was trying to maintain control. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, drank half of it before responding. What about them? You've systematically separated every asset we jointly owned. You've removed me as beneficiary on your life insurance, your retirement accounts, your will. You've taken the rental property out of both our names. You've split the investment portfolio. It's like you're preparing for divorce without actually filing for one. I sat down across from her, still in my cycling gear, sweat-soaked and exhausted. I'm preparing for reality. You said marriage doesn't entitle either of us to special treatment. Assets, inheritance, financial planning, those are all forms of special treatment. They're reserved for people who actively prioritize relationships and invest in partnership. You've been very clear that's not what you want from our marriage. Michelle's hands were shaking slightly as she picked up the first document, my revised will that Richard had drafted. This leaves everything to your sister and your father. I get nothing. After 8 years of marriage, I'm written out of your life completely like I never existed. You'll get whatever state law requires, which isn't much considering most of my significant assets were acquired before marriage or through inheritance. But yes, the discretionary bequests go to people who actually prioritize me in their lives. I took another drink of water, my throat still dry from the ride. Rachel calls me every Sunday just to talk. My father makes time to spend entire Saturdays with me playing golf. They show up, Michelle. They demonstrate through consistent action that I matter to them. I'm your wife. That should mean something. It did mean something. It meant you got automatic access to my financial future, my assets, my planning. But you established that being your husband doesn't automatically mean anything special, so I adjusted accordingly. This is equality. This is the framework you designed. She set down the will and picked up the investment portfolio statements, two separate accounts now where there used to be one. You took 60% of our investments. Just remove them and put them in your name only. I took the investments I funded. The cryptocurrency I bought with my bonuses while you mocked me for wasting money on internet coins. The tech stocks I purchased with overtime pay. The growth funds I contributed to from my salary. Your contributions are still in the joint account, untouched. I didn't take anything that was actually ours, Michelle. I separated what was mine from what we built together. That's not how marriage works. When you're married, everything becomes shared. I almost laughed at that. Really? Because 3 months ago you were very clear that marriage doesn't mean automatic sharing of priorities, time, attention, or consideration. But somehow it means automatic sharing of assets and financial benefits? You can't have it both ways. Either we're genuinely partners who share everything, including making each other a priority, or we're individuals maintaining separate lives who happen to be legally married. You chose the second option. These financial changes just reflect that choice. She shuffled through more papers, her corporate training evident in how methodically she was approaching this even while clearly panicking. She pulled out the insurance policy declarations, red pen marks highlighting where she'd been removed as beneficiary. The life insurance goes to your father now. If something happens to you, I get nothing to cover the mortgage, nothing to maintain our lifestyle, nothing. If something happens to me, you'll be fine. You have your own income, your own career, your own life that you've been very busy building independently of me. The mortgage is in both our names, so you'd be responsible for your share. Same as any roommate situation. Roommate situation? Thomas, we're married. Are we? Because married people usually prioritize each other. They make time for each other. They plan their lives together instead of in parallel. What we've been doing for the past year looks a lot more like cohabitation than marriage. Michelle set down the insurance papers and picked up the property deed and trust documents for the rental condo. Her hands were shaking harder now, reality settling in with weight she clearly hadn't anticipated. The condo. You removed me completely. That property was supposed to be part of our retirement plan. It was my inheritance from my parents. I added you to the deed when we got married because I thought we were building a permanent life together. But you've made it very clear that our marriage is just one component of your life, not the foundation of it. People who view you as optional don't get automatic access to your inheritance. What happens if we get divorced? Do I get anything? Her voice was small now, the corporate confidence completely gone. You'd get whatever a court determines is fair based on actual marital contributions and assets acquired during marriage. Which, given that most of my significant assets were either inherited or acquired through my individual earnings and investment decisions, probably isn't much. But that's what happens when you treat your marriage like a casual arrangement instead of a committed partnership. She was crying again, but different from this morning. These weren't angry tears or manipulative tears. These were fear tears, the realization that she'd been playing a game without understanding the stakes. I can't believe you do this to me. Plan this whole thing out like some kind of revenge scheme. This isn't revenge. Revenge would be vindictive, emotional, designed to hurt you. This is strategic risk management. I'm protecting assets I worked hard for from someone who's demonstrated they don't view me as a priority worth maintaining. If you died tomorrow, would you leave everything to someone who explicitly told you that you shouldn't expect special treatment from them? Or would you leave it to people who actually showed up for you consistently? She didn't answer that question. We both knew what the honest answer would be. These changes aren't personal, Michelle. They're practical. You wanted a marriage where neither person expects preferential treatment. I'm giving you exactly that. No preferential treatment in my schedule, my planning, my assets, or my future. Complete equality. But what if I don't want that anymore? What if I was wrong? Then you need to demonstrate through sustained action that you've actually changed, not just words when you realize the consequences of your choices. Because right now, you're not upset that we don't prioritize each other. You're upset that you're losing financial benefits you assumed were permanent regardless of how you treated me. Michelle gathered all the papers into a messy pile, no longer maintaining that organized corporate presentation. How do I fix this? Tell me what I need to do to fix this. You can't fix it with a conversation or a gesture or a dramatic moment. You fix it by consistently showing up. By making me a priority through your actions, not just your words. By demonstrating over weeks and months that you actually value our partnership more than your pottery classes and wine tastings and charity committees. By choosing us when it's inconvenient, when it conflicts with something you'd rather do, when it requires actual sacrifice. And if I do that, you'll change everything back? Put me back on the accounts and the will and the property. I stood up, needing to shower and eat and process this entire exhausting day. Maybe, eventually, if you prove through consistent behavior that you're invested in this marriage as something more than convenient or financially beneficial. But I'm not making any promises, Michelle. You broke something fundamental when you told me I shouldn't expect special treatment. Trust that took 8 years to build got destroyed in one conversation. Rebuilding it will take time and effort and proof that you actually mean what you're saying. She looked up at me from the table, mascara streaked, surrounded by evidence of just how thoroughly I'd restructured our financial entanglement. I do mean it. I want to fix this. Then start showing up. Cancel some pottery classes to spend evenings with me. Skip a wine tasting to do something I enjoy. Make me feel like I'm actually a priority in your life instead of an obligation you resent. I headed toward the shower, exhausted from 48 miles of cycling and an entire day of emotional confrontation. Behind me, I heard her crying quietly, and I felt something that might have been sympathy mixed with satisfaction. She'd wanted to know what happened when you told someone they shouldn't expect special treatment. Now she was learning that lesson in detail, and it was clearly more expensive than she'd anticipated. The water was scalding hot, exactly how I liked it after a long ride, and I stood there letting it wash away the sweat and the tension. I didn't know if Michelle would actually follow through, if she'd demonstrate the sustained change necessary to rebuild what she'd broken. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had agency in my own marriage, like I wasn't just accepting whatever treatment she decided to give me. I'd established boundaries, protected my assets, and made it clear that partnership required mutual investment. Whether she chose to actually invest was entirely up to her, but I was done being the only one trying. The first real change came on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after our financial confrontation. I was getting ready for bowling league, pulling on my team shirt and looking for my wrist brace, when Michelle appeared in the bedroom doorway. "I canceled pottery class tonight," she said quietly. I looked up from tying my shoes. "But, are you sick?" "No, I just thought maybe we could have dinner together. Like we used to on Tuesdays before I started the classes." I studied her face, looking for manipulation or performance, but all I saw was genuine nervousness. "I've got bowling in 40 minutes. "I know, but maybe I could come with you? Watch your game? I've never actually seen you bowl." That stopped me completely. In the year and a half I'd been on Derek's team, Michelle had never once expressed interest in attending. "You want to come to bowling league? It's not exactly glamorous. Just a bunch of guys drinking cheap beer and talking about nothing important." "I know, but it's important to you, and I'd like to understand why." She was wringing her hands slightly, that nervous gesture she only did when she was genuinely uncertain. "I've spent so much time on my hobbies that I never learned anything about yours." That was wrong. I could have said no. Could have told her this was my space now, that she'd made her choices and needed to live with the consequences. But something in her expression made me pause, made me remember why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "But you're buying your own beer, and if Derek makes terrible jokes, which he will, you're not allowed to complain." She smiled, small but genuine. "Deal." Watching Michelle try to fit into bowling league was awkward at first. She overdressed in slacks and a nice blouse while everyone else wore jeans and team shirts. She tried too hard to laugh at Derek's awful puns and clearly had no idea what a spare versus a strike meant. But she stayed the entire 3 games, cheered when I bowled well, and didn't check her phone once. On the drive home, she asked questions about the scoring system and why I preferred a hook ball over straight throws. "That was actually fun," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "Your friends are nice." Derek's funnier than I expected, even if his jokes are terrible. "He grows on you," I admitted. "Like a fungus, but a friendly one." She laughed, and it felt like the first genuine moment we'd shared in months. The following Thursday, I came home from work to find Michelle in the kitchen actually cooking, not just heating up something pre-made or ordering takeout. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the house, and she had that focused expression she got when she was trying to follow a recipe exactly. "What's this?" I asked, setting down my work bag. "Homemade lasagna. Your mom's recipe. I found it in that cookbook she gave me years ago that I never used." She glanced at me nervously. "I know I skipped pottery class again. I wanted to do this instead." The lasagna was slightly overcooked on the edges and the cheese had browned unevenly, but it tasted like effort and intention. We ate together at the dining table instead of in front of the TV, and she asked about the production issues at work, actually listening when I explained the supply chain problems we were having with a critical component. "I'm sorry I never asked about your work before," she said, refilling my wine glass. "I think I got so focused on building my own identity that I forgot we're supposed to be building something together." Identity isn't a bad thing to focus on. But it can't be the only thing. I know that now. I know I hurt you when I said that thing about special treatment. I've been thinking about it constantly, how selfish I sounded, how I made you feel like you didn't matter. I set down my fork. "You made me feel like I was an obligation. Like spending time with me was something you had to endure rather than something you wanted to do. That must have been awful. I can see now how my actions communicated that, even if I didn't consciously mean it that way." She reached across the table tentatively, and I let her take my hand. "I want to be better. I want us to be better. It's going to take more than a few dinners and missing some pottery classes. You understand that, right?" "I do. I'm prepared to put in the work for however long it takes." The changes continued gradually over the next several weeks. Michelle declined an invitation to an exclusive wine country retreat that her book club was planning, saying she'd rather spend that weekend at home with me. We had a staycation, nothing fancy, just sleeping late and cooking breakfast together and taking walks along the beach near our house. She started asking about my cycling club, my bowling scores, my relationship with my father and sister. Real questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite obligation. When I mentioned missing the vintage car shows because they conflicted with her schedule, she looked up the next one and bought us both tickets. We spent an entire Saturday walking through rows of classic vehicles, and she listened while I explained the difference between muscle cars and hot rods, never once checking her phone or seeming bored. "You really love this stuff," she observed while we were admiring a pristine 1970 Plymouth Barracuda. "I do. Always have since I was a kid helping my dad restore his old Chevy. I wish I'd paid attention to that before. I wish I'd asked about the things that made you happy instead of assuming they were just guy stuff I wouldn't understand." These weren't dramatic gestures or grand romantic moments. They were small, consistent demonstrations that she was actually trying, actually choosing us over the independent life she'd been so focused on building. I noticed when she turned down Thursday pottery sessions to have dinner with me. I noticed when she stopped posting Instagram photos from wine tastings because she wasn't going to them anymore. I noticed when she started keeping her charity committee involvement to 1 meeting per month instead of 3. The breakthrough came on a Sunday afternoon in early February, almost 5 months after that anniversary dinner that had changed everything. We were sitting on the couch reading, that comfortable silence that happens when you're genuinely content in someone's presence, when Michelle set down her book. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "What's that?" "What if we adopted a dog? Together? Something we'd both be responsible for, both have to make time for, both have to prioritize." I looked at her, surprised. Michelle had always been lukewarm about pets, worried about the mess and the commitment and how it would limit her freedom to travel and stay out whenever she wanted. "You want a dog?" I want us to have something we're both invested in. Something that requires us to show up for each other and make joint decisions and actually function as a team. She was nervous again, that hand-wringing gesture. I know it sounds small, but I think it could be symbolic of the kind of partnership I want us to have. The kind I should have been working toward all along instead of just demanding independence. A dog meant compromise. Meant coming home at reasonable hours. Meant planning trips together or finding pet sitters. Meant daily responsibility and shared decisions and exactly the kind of mutual investment she'd been avoiding. That's actually a really good idea, I said. We spent the next 3 weeks visiting animal shelters, and Michelle was the one who fell in love with Charlie, a 3-year-old golden retriever mix whose previous owners had surrendered him when they divorced. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He deserves people who'll actually commit to him, Michelle said, scratching behind his ears while he leaned into her leg. People who won't give up when things get hard. Yeah, he does. We brought Charlie home on a Saturday, and Michelle immediately created a schedule for his feeding, walks, and vet appointments. She put it on our shared calendar, blocked out time in both our days, made it clear this was joint responsibility that required joint effort. Watching her research dog training techniques and prepare our house for a pet with the same intensity she'd once applied to her pottery and wine tastings told me something fundamental had shifted. One evening a few weeks after we got Charlie, we were walking him along the beach at sunset, the same beach visible from that anniversary dinner at the Pearl Bay. Michelle stopped, watching the waves, and turned to me. I know I don't deserve it, but would you consider putting me back on the rental property deed? And the other financial stuff. I'd been expecting this conversation, preparing for it. Why should I? Because I'm not the same person who told you that marriage doesn't mean special treatment. Because I've spent 5 months proving through my actions that I actually want to prioritize us. Because I understand now that partnership means choosing each other consistently, not just when it's convenient. She took a breath. And because I want to prove to you that I'm invested in our future together, not just the financial benefits. What about your independence? Your individual identity? All those things you said you needed space to develop. I still need those things. But I understand now that independence doesn't mean isolation, and individual identity doesn't mean ignoring the person you married. I can have my interests and my growth and still make you a priority. It's not either or. I watched Charlie chase a seagull, completely unsuccessful but absolutely committed to the attempt. I'll talk to my attorney about the property. But the will and the investment stay as they are for now. You've made progress, but trust takes time to rebuild. I understand. I'm just grateful you're willing to consider it at all. She squeezed my hand. I know I almost destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too focused on myself to see what I was losing. We walked in silence for a while, and I thought about the past 5 months, the anger and hurt and gradual healing. I need you to understand something, I finally said. This only works if we both keep showing up. I'll make you a priority, but you have to continue making me one too. Not just until we're comfortable again, but permanently. That's what marriage is supposed to be. I know. And I will. I promise I'll keep choosing us, even when it's inconvenient, even when something else seems more exciting, even when I'm tired or busy or would rather do something else. She stopped walking, turned to face me fully. You taught me that special treatment isn't something you demand or expect. It's something you earn through consistent love and effort and showing up. I want to earn that from you again. 6 months later, Michelle was back on the rental property deed, but not as automatic co-owner. As equal partner who demonstrated through sustained action that she deserved to be there. The investments and will stayed separate, a reminder that some things, once broken, require years to fully repair. But we were building something real again, something mutual and intentional. She'd learned that independence without partnership is just loneliness with better marketing, and I'd learned that boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. Charlie became the physical representation of our commitment to each other, this living creature who required us both to show up daily, make joint decisions, and prioritize something bigger than our individual wants. Every morning walk, every feeding schedule, every vet appointment was proof that we could function as an actual team when both people were willing to put in the effort. Sometimes when we're having dinner together on Tuesday nights, Michelle will reference that anniversary dinner at the Pearl Bay, how close she came to destroying everything because she didn't understand the difference between independence and isolation. I was so stupid, she'll say. I had someone who planned perfect dinners and bought expensive flowers and wore the watch I gave him, and I told him he shouldn't expect special treatment. You weren't stupid. You were confused about what you wanted. We both learned something from it. What did you learn? That I can't be the only one investing in a relationship. That boundaries are necessary. That special treatment is earned through mutual effort, not demanded as a right. I'll take her hand across the table. And that you're capable of change when you actually commit to it. She's kept that commitment for over a year now, and I've slowly started letting my guard down, started trusting that the woman who shows up consistently is the real Michelle, not the one who was so focused on finding herself that she almost lost us both. The orchids I bought for that anniversary dinner died after 9 days, but what grew in their place turned out to be something stronger, something that required actual care and attention from both of us to survive. Turns out special treatment isn't about flowers or fancy dinners or grand gestures. It's about choosing someone consistently, showing up when it's inconvenient, and proving through daily action that partnership matters more than independence. Michelle learned that lesson the hard way, and we're both better for it.